I have a responsibility, Honorable Member, through you, Mr. Speaker, to ask questions on behalf of the persons that we represent and the people of the country. And answers appropriately must be given, not a dictate from a member. No, it cannot be. In effect, what he's saying, the Public Service Commission appoint permanent secretaries, so I should ask them no questions. The ministers are overall responsible for the leadership of the government departments. They have a fundamental responsibility. And you can't tell me to ask the Public Service Commission a question. The Public Service Commission is not a creature of this Parliament. Let's get it right, Mr. Speaker. They are not a creature of this Parliament. Just like a permanent secretary or cabinet secretary is not a creature. Members of this side of the House, the government side, yes, they're green, but there are ways of getting information correctly, Mr. Speaker. And you can't be waving and tell me shut up. That's little children behavior. I have a responsibility, and you can't come here and talk like that. I do my best in cooperating and offering advice consistently. My whole approach this morning will tell you this. And my questions and information before I say a word. But I will not sit here as a member of this House, and after 30 odd years, almost 40 years as a member and father of this House, I didn't give myself that title to have this sort of answers given by the Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, the question has to be answered, Mr. Speaker, and I hope you will use your good office to advise the member that the question must be answered, and don't ask me to go to the Public Service Commission for answer. Mr. Speaker, and as I take my seat, I would like that when questions are asked, because the questions will be coming. It will be coming. It won't stop. So if I have to be spoken to like a baby here by members in answering a question, in refusing to answer a question, then it will have to be over and over multiple times. I just ask members, in giving me answers, I would prefer to have the answers before the Parliament, because there may be need for follow-up question. Clarification, not necessarily more information, but clarification. So I just ask you, through you, Mr. Speaker, to members on the other side of the House, in future, I would prefer to have the answers before the Parliament session so that I can review them and give appropriate reply as I see fit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Leader of the Opposition, and your points and concerns have been noted. Next item.
Statement by ministers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And a very pleasant good morning to everyone. Mr. Speaker, I stand to provide a statement on the recent national symposium organized by this government, and in particular by the Ministry of Economic Development, Planning, Tourism, Agriculture, ICT, and the creative industries. The symposium, Mr. Speaker, was held May 10 to 12 with the objective of getting a clearer understanding on where we are with the creative industries in Grenada. The creative industry, Mr. Speaker, is a new area of economic activity that this government has introduced as a complement to our traditional economic sectors like agriculture, tourism, manufacturing, construction, and so on. And we see this sector, this new sector, as a major one that can generate meaningful, long-lasting, sustainable employment for our people, in particular, our young people. That will give them a sense of great expectation, gives them a sense of individual pride, make them feel good about themselves, and in so doing, contribute meaningfully to the social and economic transformation of our homeland and of our people. And so the conference was held from the 10th to the 12th of May. We invited the major and the well-known practitioners in the world to come here in Grenada and to share with us their experiences, to share with us what we can do or what we should do to advance the creative industries in Grenada. For your information, Mr. Speaker, the creative industries comprises many areas. It is the performing arts, the visual arts, music, dance, painting, design, some people may say culture, filmmaking, video making. So there are many areas. And what we observe from the conference, Mr. Speaker, is that there are many Grenadians here and abroad who are actively involved in the creative industries and who are in fact making a decent living, earning a decent income, and living a decent life from their involvement in the creative industry. So we had people like Dr. Keith Nurse, who has written many books on the creative industry. We had our own Eddie Bullen, who received many awards as a musician. Faye Noel, and many others. In fact, our own local hero in the music industry, Mr. Killer, Hollis Mapp, also took part in the discussion. There were 3 solid days of discussion and chatting the way forward. On the first day, Mr. Speaker, we had 300 persons attending. On the second day, we had 275 persons attending. On the third day, we had around 280 persons attending. So for the 3 days, we had about 900 persons attending the conference. And what was nice, Mr. Speaker, they all stayed on. They all stayed on. And they asked a lot of questions. They asked a lot of questions. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we also had with us, for those 3 days, Dr. Didicus Jules, who is the head of the OECS Economic Affairs Secretariat in St. Lucia. He came here for those 3 days, sat with us, and discussed the way forward for the creative industries in Grenada. So I want to make the point, Mr. Speaker, that this was indeed a wonderful occasion for the government and people of this country. Now that we have a full understanding of what the industry means to us and to our people. We have, in fact, moved towards enhancing the Creative Affairs Secretariat within the ministerial complex. We have just appointed an operations manager. We have already provided the creatives in Grenada with opportunities to enhance their business by providing concessions, 100% concessions on items that they want to bring in for the industry. We are now putting in place the correct institutional framework to manage and to develop the creative industry in Grenada. And it involves, as well, we're going to draft a 3 to 5 year strategic plan for the industry. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to take the opportunity to thank all those who worked without rest to organize that symposium. In fact, on the last day, we had a presentation on the talent of our local creatives. And I wish you were there to see how talented our people are. There was an exhibition as well on the many products that our creatives produce. That too was also encouraging and motivating. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to say to you also, and to this honorable House, that the symposium was fully financed from external sources. We got money from outside to pay for the symposium. In fact, when we went to Washington sometime in April, we had a meeting, the Latin America and Caribbean Bank, commonly called CAF, and we asked them for the financing for the symposium, and they were so happy, and they readily provided it. And maybe I should say the figure here, $50,000 US to finance the symposium. Good? So that was wonderful, Mr. Speaker. But of course, our local people contributed as well towards the financing of the symposium. Mr. Speaker, I want to praise and to recognize the work of our local people here, the ability to organize and to implement. Because, Mr. Speaker, if you were there, you would be amazed at the quality of presentations and the manner in which the symposium went smoothly, without interruption. You think you were in the big countries, as we see. Trust me, you see us in this country, we're good, and we can do good things. And so the praises that came from that symposium, Mr. Speaker, were many. And what they are now saying to us is that Grenada should take the lead in developing the creative industries within the OECS. And our next major symposium would be a sub-regional symposium on the creative industry in the OECS. And again, CAF, the Caribbean Latin American Bank, has agreed to provide the financing for that major event. Because we in the OECS recognize that that particular industry is a major, very important sector for generating new jobs and for giving our people decent employment with decent income and helping to transform our economy. So I want to thank Orlando Romain and his team of people who work with him. I remember from my head, Eugene Gittins. He's a famous, well-known musician in Grenada. He worked as well with us. Christopher DeWeeks and many others. They worked and they put on a show that was the envy of many. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to end by saying those creatives in Grenada, don't be afraid to visit our office on the 3rd floor of the ministerial complex for whatever information that you will need to assist you in the development of your creative work. We are here to help, and the office has been created for that purpose. So feel free to visit, and you'll get the kind of support that you need to take your creative work forward. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we are planning for August of this year another major creative event, which will be a film symposium, in which there are many Grenadians, Mr. Speaker, all over the world who are making important films, and those films are being recognized internationally. So we are going to work with our filmmakers in Grenada to organize that other important symposium, but now we're going to base on the film industry in Grenada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable MP, for St. Andrew South West. And do I see, yes, MP for St. George Northeast?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I take the opportunity also to join my colleague in providing very brief ministerial statements on update on work presently being pursued, in particular at the Ministry of Culture. As Line Minister, Mr. Speaker, I would like to update the honorable members on the construction of the Seamoon Cultural Center. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, government inherited a project where monies were being advanced without the correct approval and in a manner that needed to be in keeping with best practices and procedures. By my tone, Mr. Speaker, you can see that I'm being modest in attempting to explain what the current situation was when we came into office. And while we are in no way prepared to see the opportunity of this project lost for the lovely people of St. Andrew Northeast and by extension Grenada, Karakupiti Matni, we did have to take the decision to slow what was going on there, to ensure that in the interest of Grenada, that our resources were being adequately invested. Mr. Speaker, within 4 months of reviewing this project, it was obvious that the concept that was being constructed and what was done prior would have run us into significant problems, and Grenada essentially would have wasted almost $30 million on a pavilion and a stage. Now, I'm not here to focus particularly on figures at the moment, but I want to deal specifically, Mr. Speaker, in giving this update on the technical issues of the project and why we had to create solutions when we came in. In October of 2022, we had to make some significant changes, and we grouped them in 3 areas. 1, structural changes. 2, MEP or MEPs, which is the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing installation services. And 3, architectural. So under structural, we had to resign the foundation system. We had to resign the structural members that accompany foundation system. We added some significant improvement and details on the roof of the pavilion and for the stage at which people would be allowed to perform. So we had to redesign that. Under MP, we had to re-evaluate all of the elements, redesign the systems, so electrical, plumbing, etc. Added some new improvements and considerations under that. Under the architectural grouping, we had to resize and reorganize the spaces, aesthetics, features, social inclusion, material finishes, architectural details, etc. Now, the reason why we had to do all of this, and I want the nation to listen to this clearly, no environmental impact assessment was conducted. Not because it was too costly, well, at least I don't know what the rationale and thinking and the mindset was. But what was said by the last administration this was an old site, and therefore an EPA was not necessary. Mr. Speaker, I want to highlight this point because I think in modern construction, it doesn't matter if Hurricane Ivan had thrown down the building before, but in modern construction, that should be and should have been a standard practice, and it was waived. Either it was through the need for expediency, or quite frankly, some people just didn't care, but that was waived. And so, one of the other things that we have done since coming in was to say that we were not going to leave it up to a ministry single-handedly to manage the process, but we were going to establish a management committee which would look at the Simon Cultural Center and its construction. So we decided to organize a group of individuals to be named shortly who would be looking after the interest, one, of the phase and stages during the construction, ensuring that we combine the technical aspects from the Ministry of Works as engineers, etc., ensuring that we have also the other aspects like from the acoustic, ensuring that all things are going to be lined up well, all the elements work together, rather than taking a very political stance on this particular project. Because we believe, just like the many people of St. Andrew Northeast, that this project is a single big transformative element, if done right, that can transform their cultural lives, the cultural lives of Grenadians, and also their economic lives in that constituency and community. So we believe we must get it right. So out of that decision, we heard the last sitting that consultations were done. Mr. Speaker, I can report to the Honorable House that no consultations, as far as our records are concerned, no consultations were done, none whatsoever. We have no evidence of it. If it did occur, we have not seen it. We have done our own research and investigation to see whether or not there was some public consultation, but as far as we are concerned, no consultations were done. Mr. Speaker, the consultations that are required for such a project requires professionals, elements of the community, and everybody to be brought into one room, not a political consultation. So no serious consultations at the Department of Culture ever existed in relation to this project, which is key. Because if we are going to construct or reconstruct such an element, the last thinking of the last administration said that this was going to house skills training center, it was going to house some other elements, which clearly was not included in the design. So if you did consult, some of the errors and mistakes or deliberate attempts to leave out things that we didn't see, it should not have existed, or at least in part, it should not have been so blatant where you didn't do an environmental impact assessment. So that's the one of the most important aspects. This management team will be absolutely in the construction phase that we will recommence. Mr. Speaker, we have also included in the redesign a theater. This was not there before. We are now including. You just heard the member for St. Andrew Southeast, through you, speak on the creative industry and the Southwest, and the vision that this administration have for the creative industry, and our attempt to roll out a very comprehensive model that will see the building and constructing of a genuine creative industry in small island developing states. So you just heard that vision. And it is critical for us because when we look at facilities, this lines up very well with our agenda. But the problem is that cross-sectional conversation that should have happened with the orange economy, that cross-sectional conversation that should happen in terms of what rooms are going to be available, was never there. So we are pleased to announce that we have included these new elements. So we've included the theater, which will help training and development in drama. It can house approximately just over 100 participants, maybe about 110. We have included a room for dance, where we'll teach people how to dance. We've included a music lab. We've included a visual arts room, where people are going to be doing painting or learning the components of painting. We're going to teach that, and they themselves are going to produce art. We have included also a room for studying culture. Part of the problem is that you cannot design a facility and you don't have a clear model as to how you're going to use that facility to push what you have to push. So that is one of the elements that we have corrected as well. And we've also included, Mr. Speaker, a sick bay, among other rooms necessary. Now, what we inherited, and I'm not making this up, it's there in the drawings, were just largely empty spaces with rooms for food court. So, it was just to eat our food. Nothing on the developmental side of this important project. And so we had significant concerns with this, and as a cabinet, we decided to take a serious lead into understanding what was there and then planning how we are going to fix this going forward. So, Mr. Speaker, we couldn't continue with that and had to go this route that I'm announcing. But we are happy to say that as a nation, once this project is completed, everybody is going to benefit. I want to make this point honestly to the Honorable Member of St. Andrew Northeast. And she knows deep down she can reach out if she has genuine concerns. She knows that. I won't make that up. But I want to caution, let's work together to fix this and get this right for your constituents and by extension Grenadians living in your constituency. Because the attempt to go out on a limb to say that this administration stopped the project and we ain't care about the poor man and we ain't care about the people of Northeast St. Andrew is not true. We have this actual evidence here. And if all what I am saying here you can debunk, please provide that information, and not just to me or the Parliament, but provide it to the nation. But if you cannot, let us honestly sit as professionals, as young people, as politicians who are interested in service to our country and discuss this, get it right, and then go forward united. This is an element, Mr. Speaker, that I believe opposition and government can work together on. So I'm appealing to the member on the other side through you, member for St. Andrew Northeast. You know that you can reach out if you have a genuine concern and you want to see the right thing done. If your people are behind you, reach out and let's have a conversation on it. Other than that, let's not go down the road. That would be my advice of playing political games with this matter. So, Mr. Speaker, we do have additionally updates that revolve around culture that we can share. And just to say that we have seen the commencement of Spice Mass launch 2023. We anticipate, Mr. Speaker, that as Grenada moves toward 50 next year, greater things are going to be in store. And I must place on record the Cabinet's confidence in both members and the other stakeholders to make this carnival large. However, we must continue, Mr. Speaker, to understand that the developmental aspect, which is what this report is intending to raise as an issue of our culture, must not be neglected. So on one hand, we must promote the culture, but on the other hand, we must build facilities that can help train our people so that we can continue our culture. So with these few words, I would like to end here and say, Mr. Speaker, honestly, a house is not a home, but a home is where the love is. So let me just take the opportunity to welcome this honorable member, Mr. Speaker, through you, and look forward to our genuine contributions as we continue to move Grenada forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable MP for St. George Northeast. Okay, it seems we can move to the next item. No lights. No other lights. Okay, I didn't see your light. The gentleman was within my view. Honorable MP for St. George South.
Good morning to everyone. And Mr. Speaker, I could not let this proceeding pass without speaking about this. And let me just make one thing clear. This administration, in November of last year, we had a meeting with the UK representative, and that was where we lost funding for the UK SIF project. The UK SIF project included the Western Main Road, and it included a water expansion project for the south of the island. That project was on the books since 2016. Because of the low implementation rate, and because nothing was done up to last year, the UK, based on their budget constraints, could not proceed with the project. If we had a better implementation rate and the project was started, they would have honored the project. And that is why we lost the project. When we came into office last year, we tried our best to save it, but we couldn't because of the lack of implementation by the last administration. And let's get that clear, because I've seen politics being played with that over and over again. And this year is truth. However, I'm happy to report that our Prime Minister, leading the way, were able to get or to regain financing for one component of the project, which approximates approximately $70 million. And Mr. Speaker, let me just say this. That is not a loan we are talking about. We are talking about a grant. A loan, you have to pay back a loan. We are talking about a grant that was given, was taken away, and we fought to get it back, given to the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and pt2. So, Mr. Speaker, let me just make it clear that we are not, this government here, we are not in the business of losing free money. We are in the business of ensuring that we use whatever resources is given to us in the correct way. And you can be rest assured of that. So, Ms. Honest, over here, and if we get the fund already, we have secured the fund, but you got it and you lost it. So I want to put on record, let us check performance. You got it in 2016. Up to 2022, you did nothing with it. We got it back in 2023. Let's see the progress. And tell me which hands is the safer hands. Mr. Speaker, I just want to assure Grenada, Carriacou, and pt2 that we are surely doing our best to make our mark. And yes, we may be young. Yes, we may be inexperienced. But we have the vigor, we have the right attitude, and we have the courage to make the tough decisions when we have to make them. Because we all have to do it in order to move Grenada forward in a positive manner. This is the way we have to govern. And I want again to applaud our Prime Minister for getting back what we lost. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable MP for St. John South. Is it MP for St. John? Yes, Honorable MP for the constituency of St. John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me first start off by saying good morning to everyone in this honorable house and to our visitors who came this morning, present morning. I trust that you are objectively viewing this parliament sitting for what it is and not for what it isn't. Mr. Speaker, before I go into my ministerial statement, I want to take this opportunity to welcome someone who is very dear and near to me. And I know that we ought not to call persons or make comments on the relationship that you have with someone, but it would be remiss of me not to mention how powerful and how admirable this woman, the Honorable MP for St. Andrew Northwest, is to me and to all other aspiring young women. Not only those who want to get involved in frontline politics, but for those who are in conditions and situations that they might be afraid to take a bold step. It's liberating. And at the end of the day, yes, you want to serve people. Yes, you want to change Grenada. Yes, you want to do things for others, but you cannot lose yourself, and you cannot compromise yourself in doing so. And against this backdrop, Mr. Speaker, I want to officially welcome my mother on the best side of this honorable house. And I know, Mr. Speaker, that she will not regret it. And while it may not be our style to say that a 15th seat is the best for our country, but the doors are open to welcome any others who have that testicular fortitude. The doors are open, Mr. Speaker, for those members on the other side who have the testicular fortitude to come forward and move Grenada forward under this transformational agenda. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to report on some of the progress and programs and projects underneath my portfolio of climate resilience, environment, and renewable energy. As mentioned in our budget, Mr. Speaker, our mission statement is to be the premier agency of government mainstreaming climate change, biodiversity, environment, and renewable energy actions in partnership with public and private sector, civil society organizations, and international organizations, mobilizing resources and leading actions that will minimize the impacts of climate change at all levels of our society. Mr. Speaker, for updates on national plans and policies, we have received Cabinet's approval for the following policies and plans. The first one is the revised National Energy Policy for 2023 and 2035. And given the time constraint, while I would have loved to delve more into the importance of such a policy that have been left on the back burner by the former administration in terms of revising it, we have been able to get Cabinet's approval with the support from the World Bank. The goal of this policy, Mr. Speaker, is to build a competitive green economy powered by clean, sustainable, renewable energy at an affordable cost for electricity generation that would preserve the natural environment, improve the quality of life for this generation and for future generations. Mr. Speaker, we have also developed a resource mobilization strategy for 2023 onwards to 2030 as well. This document is also a critical document which is being used to engage regional and international partners in resource mobilization. And for those who understand how significant, and I think the Honorable MP on this side, Minister Andrews, spoke at our last sitting in terms of how small islands suffer from gaining access to financing to move and fast track some of our ambitious targets. And so in order for us to make the best decisions for our country, we have to ensure that our policy documents and framework is in the right order. And so this resource mobilization strategy document is one that we have accomplished within the first few months having the portfolio. Mr. Speaker, the resources that we need to take action for climate adaptation is $300 million US, and for mitigation is $600 million. So the adaptation interventions will continue to focus on actions in the following sectors. We have identified our water sector, agriculture, tourism, infrastructure, health, fisheries, coastal zone management, and not to mention CARICO and pt2 affairs. In the area of mitigation, Mr. Speaker, our interventions under this document will continue in the sectors of energy, transport, waste, forestry, and cooling. Mr. Speaker, Grenada, through Cabinet's approval, has accepted the invitation.
Honorable MP, I must interrupt you as we briefly exchange shares.
Thank you, Mr.
Madam Deputy Speaker, give the chair.
Honorable MP, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, we have accepted an invitation to join, and when I say we, I mean Grenada, to join the Global Geothermal Alliance, where I participated in my capacity as minister in the annual meeting on the margins of the 13th Arena Assembly in Abu Dhabi. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Global Geothermal Alliance is an initiative established by IRENA in 2015 to serve as a multi-stakeholder platform for enhancing dialogue, cooperating and coordinating actions to foster the deployment of geothermal energy for both electricity generation as well as heating and cooling application worldwide. This will enable us, Madam Deputy Speaker, access to data of experiences and best practices of other international and regional countries, as well as access to technical and economic support for our own geothermal activities. And might I place on record, Madam Deputy Speaker, that joining this alliance has no financial obligation. So it is free for any country in the world to join on to gain access. And I believe that as we continue to embark on our geothermal project ongoing in our country, we will benefit significantly, both technical and economic-wise, from this strategic joining of the alliance. Madam Deputy Speaker, another pivotal policy accomplishment of my ministry is the ratification of the Excaso Agreement. This is a critical milestone in the discussion about environmental protection and environmental justice. In 2018, the agreement moved to being adopted and entering into force. Grenada signed in 2019, Madam Deputy Speaker, and held public consultations in 2019. However, I am pleased to report that the ratification only happened in 2023, as there is an urgent need for us to address our stewardship and our responsibility for our environment, which can have a huge impact on our lives, livelihoods, and health. And I believe that the honorable member on my side of the House spoke for St. George Northeast, spoke about one such example as to when you don't take these things seriously, it can have detrimental impacts on our environment. Madam Deputy Speaker, Grenada will join the world on the 5th of June 2023 to celebrate the 50th anniversary of World Environment Day. And we call on all to become active environmental stewards, especially those in my constituency, Madam Deputy Speaker, as we are about to commemorate our annual Fishermen's Birthday celebration. I want to take this opportunity to invite all and sundry to participate in our Community Environment Day Cleanup Drive, which will be held on June 10th and June 11th, 2023. Madam Deputy Speaker, we've also signed an MOU with the German Development Agency to implement phase 2 of our cool contributions fighting climate change. The terminal date is January 2025. The project is funded by the International Climate Initiative of the German government. Grenada will be supported in meeting its ambitious targets for the cooling sector and in strengthening the regional institutional network in the Caribbean to replicate Grenada's best practices and the NDC RAC strategies. The other countries in this program are Costa Rica and the Philippines. So Grenada, Madam Deputy Speaker, is leading by example in terms of implementing grassroots cooling strategies to develop and fast-track some of the ambitious targets we've set out for our energy transition. Madam Deputy Speaker, we have also successfully drafted our Environmental Impact Assessment Manual. The stakeholder discussions were well attended, and the manual will be published soon for the public. For the statutory body.
Honorable Member for St. John, at this point in time, I ask you to pause so that the Speaker can replace me at this time.
Honourable Member, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Cabinet also approved our request for statutory body to establish a compliance unit for the Grenada Solid Waste Management Authority. This is a great milestone for the authority, as a compliance unit is a pivotal part of any structured organization, and the Grenada Solid Waste Management is no exception. Mr. Speaker, the establishment of a compliance unit is vital to ensuring the continuous alignment of the authority's operations with both national and international environmental standards, laws, and regulations. It creates a safety net, assuring that the authority's actions from waste collection to disposal are responsibly and ethically carried out. Mr. Speaker, our ministry is collaborating with various regional and international agencies to mobilize resources and technical assistance. And for that, Mr. Speaker, we must travel from time to time. And I want to assure you, Mr. Speaker, and to those in this honorable house, that when we travel, we must double up our workload. It is no opportunity for vacation. It is no opportunity for living up to any sort of lifestyle as being promoted by distractors in our society. Mr. Speaker, in recent times, Officials of my ministry and myself attended some of these following meetings, and I cannot list all of them due to the time constraint for this specific item. So I will just go through those ones that happened for this year. We attended the 13th Annual International Renewable Energy Agency Assembly in January in Abu Dhabi. There I engaged in public-private dialogue and quite a number of other panels geared towards understanding and mobilizing concessional funding for our country as we advance towards a just and inclusive energy transition. Mr. Speaker, at the Caribbean Renewable Energy Forum held in April in Miami, Grenada was represented by Minister Cornwall in his previous capacity as Minister for Energy and myself. We were able to attend 2 parallel sessions. This was a critical meeting, Mr. Speaker, and it is no secret that time is of the essence in the endeavor of a just transition to a low-carbon future. And so we have to marry the actions, the programs of both traditional energy and renewable energy for a very smooth transition for Grenada. Mr. Speaker, we actively explored and engaged in policy conversations and bilaterals with multilateral development banks and other international organizations on how we can achieve 100% renewable energy generation in our electricity sector. And as the months unfold, we are anticipating and looking forward to gaining much more concessional fundings and grants from these interventions as a result of our travels to Miami. In May, we attended a Caribbean Climate and Energy Conference in Aruba, funded by the Dutch government. And may I place on record, Mr. Speaker, that when we travel, very, very rare, and in almost all instances of our travel, we've never relied on government's local funding to do so. Most of our traveling comes from invitations from either governments who is hosting or organizations who is hosting that particular event or conference. So we very rarely ever have to use local funding for traveling. The outcome is to establish a Caribbean adaptation program from the Climate and Energy Conference in Aruba to support actions in the area of science, knowledge management, appropriate investment, funding, and building implementation capacity. And we are looking forward to the possibilities that exist to execute our agenda. Mr. Speaker, we have received an invitation from my minister colleague and dear friend for energy from Barbados to participate in a high-level ministerial supported by IRENA entitled the Caribbean Cooperation for Fostering Energy Transition, Investments and Finance. This event is being organized by the government of Barbados and IRENA through the Seeds Lighthouse Initiative in partnership with the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator and the Caribbean Development Bank. The Grenada delegation will have the opportunity to participate in policy discussions and showcase project results through the exhibition of our geothermal project. And we are excited to see how Barbados has been able, they are one of the leading countries in our small islands who has really and truly shown action for that transition. And we want to be a model and even better than Barbados. And so we are anticipating that coming out of this ministerial in Barbados next week, Mr. Speaker, that we will gain more access to funding, but not only funding, but to good practices and technical support to fast track some of the projects that we have ongoing. Mr. Speaker, as part of our transformational agenda, we have identified 3 subsectors as key focus areas for our ministerial projects: wind, solar, and geothermal energy in the first instance. Ongoing, we have the geothermal development project and the limbless solar PV battery hybrid project. We are now making preparations to enter into our exploratory drilling for geothermal energy. And if all goes as planned, Mr. Speaker, we will complete the drilling by the first quarter of 2025. And we anticipate that this project will not only create new opportunities and jobs for citizens in the parishes of St. John and St. Patrick, but the anticipated energy generation is 15 megawatt of baseload power. So renewable energy, Mr. Speaker, and to contextualize it for those grassroots constituents that we have, this is an opportunity for us to adapt to energy practices and to use cleaner energy that will in turn, in the long run, not allow us to pay any high electricity bill as we are faced with now. And not only will it transition or help us transition our practices here in our environment, it will also give us an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to transition some of our current engineers and so to adapt to cleaner, resilient, and better energy consumption and energy practices. Mr. Speaker, the project is advancing well. We have reinstated our geothermal working group, and very soon they would start engaging and delving into giving support to the geothermal team. This group, Mr. Speaker, will act as a steering committee to support the implementation process. Mr. Speaker, Grenada will participate in the conference as mentioned earlier in Barbados and exhibit in the first week of June in Barbados to showcase the achievements of our projects thus far. And we continue to seek to mobilize additional funding to move towards our exploration phase as we fell short due to these fundings. They have a shelf life, and if you don't go into it as fast as you can, you lose them. And prior to 2022, we've had some instances where that happened. So we are trying our utmost, Mr. Speaker, to find and mobilize additional funding so that everything comes from the outside and not in our pockets. Mr. Speaker, our target is to raise $10 million US. We've had some commitments thus far from April, and we look forward to getting more commitments as we advance. As we speak, Mr. Speaker, for our solar project in Carriacou, the work is ongoing, and we are anticipating to install a 600 kilowatt solar PV plant with battery storage, and we are working towards commissioning this plant in July 2023. And if I may speak on the behalf of the constituents of Carriacou and pt2, we almost had a national emergency. We had a national emergency, and given the inconsistencies with the load shedding and so, we see how important, and if we had a better implementation rate as a government in the past, we would have been able to say, let's switch over to our renewable energy. Let's switch over to the power from our solar plants to do so. So it is very critical. And prior to becoming the minister, Mr. Speaker, we have not, as a society, we have not really broken down what we are trying to do, our ambitious targets. We have not really broken it down to showcasing and to explaining to our constituents and policymakers as well the impact and the significance of that in their day-to-day living and their livelihoods. And Carriacou and pt2 electricity disaster is a prime example as to the importance and why we have to urgently transition to renewable energy. I am very pleased, Mr. Speaker, to report that some of the shipments of the equipment and so for the solar panels is on its way, and we already made our request to facilitate a smooth transition with the concession and so for the clearing of the items on the port. And a new implementation team was appointed, and they are performing very well to ensure that we implement within the time and the budget that we have. Mr. Speaker, permit me to also mention that the cooling sector has a critical role to play in our energy transition, and we are working very closely with the World Bank and other organizations to help us to phase out some of our ozone depleting substances in our cooling sector. We have been able to install AC unit with R290 in my office as one example in terms of our small, what we say, low-hanging fruits. And we are anticipating to extend that to other public buildings, other government public buildings. In closing, I just want to reiterate and to place on record, Mr. Speaker, that our ministry, as well as it has a mandate and an obligation in terms of the local context, there is also an international context to it. And if we don't go out and speak among the big dogs to mobilize our funding, most of the things that we have in our documents will just be things we have in our documents. And as a minister with responsibility for this portfolio, Mr. Speaker, I am not a loser. And I give my all. And I urge our constituents to read more, to listen more, look on more, and to not get distracted by what is being said on the outside. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say a special morning as well to my constituents in St. John. We also have updates, but I think I have gone beyond my time. But we have also been instrumental in terms of advancing some of our infrastructure developments in our constituency. We are fixing roads, drains. We are on our way to doing a sword turning ceremony for one of my campaign promises that have been there for 10 years for our fishermen in Old Road, Marigot. Another one of my campaign promises to my constituents is to ensure that one of my polling divisions have access to the right infrastructural needs for their own water system. So we are also on our way to roll out our rehabilitation of our Mongrambi Dam so that we have better water, and we are going to redo the pipe network for Mongrambi. We have already started the consultations, and so the constituents, the residents and community members, they are eager and they are on board. So we have that ongoing. And as we advance, Mr. Speaker, we will be rolling out some of our campaign promises. We will be rolling out some of our targets. Those coming from persons and those that, based on our field work, we were able to identify. So rest assured that this minister and this MP, Mr. Speaker, is working and is trying to move my constituency and Grenada forward in the best capacity that I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable MP, for the constituency of St. John. I think I heard you say dog. Big dogs, did I? It might have been in your exuberance, but in Parliament we are supposed to watch our language. And while dog can be a metaphor, I am not pleased with its use. Right, so I want us to control this. I sense he's in your exuberance, right? Did I see a light of someone?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
I think you heard wrong this morning, Mr. Speaker. I said big boys.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
So just for the minute, sir.
All right, leader of government business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too rise to give a ministerial statement, but I promise to be very short, just to highlight two areas that I believe the Grenadian public have been asking about for some time, in particular what we refer to as the Grenada-China housing units. I'll start there and then branch off to the Lacalome project rather briefly. We just want to assure all and sundry that the process regarding the distribution of those housing units, by and large, is complete. By and large, is complete. The committee has notified us of that, but have not submitted the written report. So I imagine, Mr. Speaker, that that report is being put together. It has been a long and tedious process because I believe they wanted to ensure that the individuals who end up with these units can afford to upkeep them, that the idea of ghetto life is not being promoted in these units. What we sorted was a ministry, Mr. Speaker, is to firstly recognize that these units have been given out of the goodness of the hearts of the People's Republic of China. And as a government, we saw it as a partnership. So we took those units and we did some, what we refer to as minor retrofitting by inserting cupboards and closets. Very beautiful, Mr. Speaker. And I'm sure the residents who would receive these units would be very happy. We've recognized from numerous complaints that earlier units given out under the same arrangements ended up in less than desirable conditions, with people, after a decade in some cases, still have their clothes in a suitcase or in a box underneath their bed, or the groceries in a bucket. And we've seen this firsthand because we visited those sites. And just to add, did not plan to say this, but we did commission an inquiry into the other three sites. And when I say an inquiry, I should say a review, Mr. Speaker, and the consultant has already submitted his first draft of the report. And as a government, we will consider and decide the best way forward as to bring back those units into decent, habitable conditions. So, Mr. Speaker, we are going to ensure that we have a homeowners association installed for the proper management of these housing sites, involving the people within what we call communities, within those communities. So we are building out communities, Mr. Speaker, so that they would collect some funds towards the insurance and towards the maintenance and the upkeep of these buildings, so that in the event that something breaks or just need general painting or cleaning, or there is an unfortunate situation of some natural disaster, they can respond, because there would be some monies in the bank to take care of the general upkeep, maintenance of that. And not just the monies in the bank, but the insurance policy that is going to secure the investment. So that is what we are doing. We are in the process of, we have already engaged the lawyers to draft the agreement. And so we are embracing all of these important elements that would ensure that these units are well kept, that the people who would occupy these units have a particular code of conduct that would guide the behavior within that community. Going forward, at some stage, we are going to enhance green space and playing area and be able to build out some common facilities like maybe laundry or some commercial space, so at least they would be able to access groceries and so right on the compound. So we are hoping that, of course, is not going to delay the process of the distribution. We hope and pray that the distribution, based on the pace that we're going with, will be able to be completed by the end of June, or at least started in June. Yeah, but it is a process, Mr. Speaker, and we had to carefully consider it to ensure that we do the right thing and do not repeat the mistakes of the past. In respect of the Lackalone project, Mr. Speaker, the government of Grenada, through the Housing Authority, has invested over $1 million in building out a waste management system. This system collects waste from approximately 93 different depositories and utilizes a green climate approach towards management of waste. And I'm talking about waste from septic waste as well as waste from the kitchen. And so, Mr. Speaker, we are happy to report that that particular investment in the lives of people at Lackalone is approximately 80% complete. And so we have visited the project recently, and we are satisfied with the progress that has been made and believe that it will function well based on the design and what we have been told by the consultants. We're happy to report that that problem is almost solved. As a matter of fact, this is the very first time we are able to walk through that neighborhood without that strong, pungent stench coming from the septic waste. The residents have expressed their joy to us being able to respond to that. And so we just want to thank them publicly, Mr. Speaker, for their patience during the period of time in which they had to endure this unfortunate situation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Leader of Government Business. I think we may proceed to the next item.
Item 14, motions. Item 15, bills.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to introduce for the first reading a bill for an act shortly entitled Agreement for the Establishment of a Partnership between Member States of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, and the African Export-Import Bank Bill 2023.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Agreement for the Establishment of a Partnership between Member States of the Caribbean Community and the African Export-Import Bank Bill 2023.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the relevant standing order of the House of Representatives be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that the relevant standing order of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all stages at this sitting. All of those who have that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of the bill.
Honourable members, the question is that the bill be read a second time. Bill of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill contains 5 clauses and 1 schedule. Clause 5, Mr. Speaker, speaks to the short title for the act for which this is a bill. Clause 2 provides for the interpretation provisions and includes the definition of terms used throughout the act. Clause 3, Mr. Speaker, provides for the agreement as set out in the schedule to the act to have the force of law domestically within the state of Grenada. Clause 4, Mr. Speaker, provides for supplementary agreements entered into between the parties to the agreement to be reflected in the schedule to the act by order published in the Gazette. And Clause 5 empowers the minister to make regulations to give effect to the provisions of the agreement and the act. Mr. Speaker, I wish to provide an overview of the agreement. The agreement for the establishment of a partnership between member states of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, and the Africa Export-Import Bank, commonly referred to as the Afri-Exim Bank Partnership Agreement, hereinafter referred to as the agreement, was launched at the first Africa-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, active, held in Bridgetown, Barbados on the 1st of September 2022. The agreement establishes a framework for cooperation between the Africa Export-Import Bank and CARICOM to strengthen trade and investment, which provides a linkage between Africa and CARICOM member states. The agreement, Mr. Speaker, aims to facilitate cooperation and mutual support, as well as help with the promotion and financing of trade between the two regions. Notably, Mr. Speaker, the agreement consolidates the effort of the bank to promote and develop trade between Africa and the Caribbean community in line with its diaspora strategy. Mr. Speaker, overall, the agreement provides a framework for fostering closer ties between the two communities and offers significant opportunities for expanding trade and investment. Mr. Speaker, one would appreciate that this type of partnership is a critical component in our transformation agenda. This partnership, Mr. Speaker, will see collaboration in these key areas: tourism and hospitality services, education services, agriculture and agribusiness, renewable energy and climate change, ICT, and culture and the creative economy. Mr. Speaker, the agreement was initially signed by 7 CARICOM countries at the opening ceremony, of which I referred to earlier. Subsequently, Mr. Speaker, the agreement was also signed by Guyana and more recently by the Bahamas. Joining Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Suriname, who were already signatories. Mr. Speaker, Barbados, St. Lucia and St. Kitts and Nevis have since deposited their respective instruments of ratification with the Executive Secretary of the Bank. And accordingly, the agreement has already entered into force pursuant to Article 17(2) of the agreement. As Grenada did not sign the agreement prior to its entry into force, Grenada may now only enter the agreement through the mechanism of accession by depositing an instrument of accession with the Executive Secretary of the Bank in accordance with Article 17(3) of the agreement, upon which date the agreement will take effect for Grenada. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding Grenada's accession to the agreement, because Grenada is a dual state, Mr. Speaker, the agreement must be incorporated into our domestic laws through an act of parliament to become of legal force and effect. And this is exactly the process we are starting this morning, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, dual states like ours maintain that international law and domestic law are mutually exclusive of each other, and that international law can only become part of our domestic law by incorporating it into our local legal system by an act of parliament. When this has been done, Mr. Speaker, it is applied by the court as domestic law rather than international law. The most common approach to including the executed agreement is via a schedule. And this is why, Mr. Speaker, the schedule is included as part of this legislation. This schedule, Mr. Speaker, consists of 18 articles. But this morning, Mr. Speaker, I would only refer to just a few of these so that we get an appreciation as to the purpose and function of the agreement. How does it work? One would appreciate, Mr. Speaker, the problems that face our country by way of exports in particular. The problems faced by business owners in accessing credit and other instruments for carrying on their business. This particular piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, and agreement is seeking to bridge that gap and to provide a framework for the purposes of import and export and building stronger ties and stronger connections and trading relationships between CARICOM and Africa. Amongst other things, Mr. Speaker, the purpose is to promote the financing by the bank of exports and imports of non-traditional African goods and services, and goods and services of member states of the Caribbean community through extending direct and indirect credit to eligible businesses in participating states. This particular function of the bank, Mr. Speaker, sets the platform for business to access credit, which in turn assists member states, and in particular Grenada, to move forward with its transformation agenda. This is an answer, Mr. Speaker, to a long question. How do we move forward? How do we finance business operation here in Grenada? Mr. Speaker, you would appreciate that currently within our banking system, it is much easier to access financing for a motor vehicle, which will cost the applicant tremendously throughout the tenure of his ownership of that vehicle, than accessing credit for his or her business. Mr. Speaker, as a caring government, we are doing whatever we can to be able to bridge this gap so that our business people can access credit and to build businesses. Businesses, and in particular small business, Mr. Speaker, represents the engine of growth for our economy. And we must do, as a caring government, whatever is needed to make this happen. The bank acts as an intermediary between African export and importers and exporters and importers of member states of the Caribbean community through the issuance of letters of credit, guarantees, and other trade documents in support of export and import transactions. Mr. Speaker, the bank supports the promotion and provision of insurance and guarantee services covering commercial and non-commercial risk associated with African exports and imports of member states of the Caribbean community. Mr. Speaker, it also supports payment arrangements aimed at expanding international trade. As a small island state, Mr. Speaker, we get our foreign exchange from exports, whether it has to do with goods or services or other. We have to find ways, Mr. Speaker, of strengthening trade and becoming exporters of goods and services. Mr. Speaker, the bank facilitates the carrying out of market research and the provision of auxiliary services aimed at expanding international trade. Market research, Mr. Speaker, is something that we need to invest in. With the advent of increasing use of technology via AI and other sources, Mr. Speaker, businesses must find new ways of building capacity. But in order to do that, Mr. Speaker, they must be able to access financial resources and technical support. This arrangement or this partnership, Mr. Speaker, is seeking to do just that. The bank also supports the carrying on of banking operations and the borrowing of funds. So in a nutshell, Mr. Speaker, this bank is about strengthening businesses and helping businesses to grow and develop to be able to answer to our unemployment problem. So, Speaker, just take a few more in not such detail. Participation, Article 3. Participation in this partnership agreement shall be open to all member states of the Caribbean community. Article 4 speaks to representative offices and subsidiaries. Mr. Speaker, the bank may establish offices or agencies or subsidiaries in participating member states. So it is likely, Mr. Speaker, based on where we want to go with this, that there could be an office or a subsidiary right here. Again, answering to the question of employment, creating employment. We've recognized that the banking system over the last 2 decades have been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. The many who would have studied banking as a career, who most likely are out of a job now. Hopefully, investments like these are going to be able to assist. So we see where we go with that. Article 5, Mr. Speaker, speaks to immunities, exemption, privileges, facilities, and concession. All participating member states shall take all legislative actions under its national law and all administrative measures as necessary to enable the bank to efficiently fulfill its purpose and carry out the functions entrusted to it. To this end, Mr. Speaker, all participating states shall accord to the bank in its territory the status, immunities, exemptions, privileges, facilities, and concessions set forth in this agreement, and shall promptly inform the bank of the specific action that it has taken in fulfillment of those purposes. The legal process. And I'll end at the legal process, Mr. Speaker. Because I believe it's important, Mr. Speaker, to highlight some of the critical components of this agreement so that the population would know what we are getting involved in. We are not a government of secrecy, Mr. Speaker. We like to tell the population as it is. We might not be flamboyant, but we like to see things as they happen. So the legal process, Mr. Speaker. The agreement speaks to the following. Action may be brought against the bank in any court of competent jurisdiction in the territory of the state in which the bank has a representative office or a subsidiary, or has carried out any operation or appointed an agent for the purpose of accepting service or notice of the process, or has otherwise agreed to be sued. This says, Mr. Speaker, that if you operate within this territory, you operate under our jurisdiction and under our laws. And as such, any actions that would be taken, the local law will apply. Disputes, Mr. Speaker, arising in connection with the operation of the bank shall be subject to conventional business practices and ordinary legal processes applicable thereto. What this is saying again, there is no hidden agenda. Ordinary business practices. And Mr. Speaker, there are a number of other schedules of the bank within the agreement, a number of other articles within the schedule, Mr. Speaker, 18 of them. And we have examined them, and we feel good that these articles within the schedule is well constructed and balanced. And we feel good about entering into this partnership. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Leader of Government Business, Honorable MP for the town of St. George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and just to say good morning to everybody. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make some brief comments on the bill as presented. First of all, I want to commend the regional bodies and the government certainly for this initiative, as you characterize it, a framework for cooperation between not only Grenada and Africa, but the entire Caribbean and Africa. We need not speak about the historical links, Mr. Speaker, because Africa is where we've all come from, in the sense that our history is tied to the African continent. But unfortunately, those ties have been broken because it is not in the interest of the powers that be to see the cooperation between the Caribbean and Africa. But now, I must say, not only in trade and other things, but in culture. African music, African movies, travel between Africa and the Caribbean, it has developed over the last several years to the point where now Africa, you know, when I was growing up, everybody thought Africa was a place with lions and tigers and everybody was scared. Now Africa is seen. Nigeria, Mozambique, Angola, South Africa, all of these countries are highly developed countries, and in fact, some of the fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa. So I want to commend the regional mechanism that has been developed, commend the government, commend the regional governments, commend Prime Minister Motley, because she, upon her ascension to office, she took a very aggressive approach to enhancing the relations between the Caribbean and Africa. So, Mr. Speaker, we're on a good path with that. I think, though, that there are a couple of areas that needs to be developed for this to develop. Transportation is one. It is easier for us to get anywhere in Europe than it is to get to Africa. We need to have some arrangements. And Africa is not far. In fact, slaves were brought here directly from Africa. Why can't we go visit Africa? Because the transportation routes have not been developed to the extent that it's easy to get to Africa. So I think we need to look at that. I remember over 15 years ago, there was a visit from a South African delegation speaking about a movement of people. Because if we are to develop tourism, the only way you can develop tourism is if people have a way of getting to the region. And maybe we develop a hub and spoke system. They land in Jamaica, they land in Barbados, they land in Trinidad, and then they're distributed throughout the region. But we have to develop some kind of mechanism, and I'm sure the Minister of Civil Aviation, I think it's my dear brother Lennox, will look into that, some mechanism for travel between Africa and the Caribbean without having to go through, as we did as slaves, through Europe or maybe through London and these countries. You need to look at that. My dear brother also spoke of the issue of market research, trade. In order to enhance our trade, we must begin to look at products that Africa needs. We need to do market research. Sometimes we just run and say, let's produce this, let's produce that. No. We need to work with our African brothers and sisters to determine what are the items. For example, these days, soursop. It's a big thing. That was not a traditional product. We need to find out what it is that, because we are small economies, and we may find that we have to come together as a region to get enough produce so as to market to these more developed economies in Africa. So again, that is something we need to look at. We need to also, Mr. Speaker, look at culture, and there's an initiative now with respect to music. We need, I know Mr. Killer, for example, has done quite a bit in music in Africa. We need to export our music to the African continent, our jab rhythms and all of that. We need to find a way to develop from the ministries of culture. Again, I think my brother Lennox is that minister too. You seem to be minister of a lot of things, my brother. Who can develop that mechanism so that the jab rhythms get into Africa as Caribbean rhythms. And you know, the strange thing is these rhythms came from Africa to the Caribbean. Now we're exporting a more, maybe a different, but with the same base in the African continent. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe these areas are important. And finally, on diplomatic relations, I think we need to establish diplomatic councils, embassies, whatever, on the African continent more. I think we have an embassy in Morocco. Morocco is in Africa, it's in north of Africa. I visited Kenya, I visited Uganda and these countries, and there were in-depth discussions about doing that. Maybe it might be very expensive for us to each of us establish embassies, but I'm sure, and it's being looked at in Barbados and other islands, we come together and establish, as we did during the revolution in London. Remember, the OECS bought a building, and each one of us had an office in that building, as we did in Morocco some years ago. So I said to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I'm sure I'm speaking to the converted, that we need to move aggressively to develop these diplomatic relations with the African continent. The bottom line is, we have a lot to benefit from these relations with Africa. Our culture, our tourism, our trade, our agriculture, we can benefit to a large extent from this relationship. So I have no hesitation, Mr. Speaker, because remember, the Africa Union, I think it was way back in 2012, and I did go to a conference in, I think it was Uganda at that time. They have accepted the diaspora as an entity. We are observers at the Africa Union. So in other words, we have a footing already, and that is what the basis that was laid for this mechanism was through the Africa Union recognition of the role of the diaspora in the development of Africa and Africans throughout the world. So I think with all of that, Mr. Speaker, I think the member went through all of the details. We have no difficulty with supporting it, but I think there are some areas that we need to identify that needs urgent attention. Transportation, market research, all of that needs to be looked at so that we can not just sign an agreement and 5 years forward we do nothing, but we actually choose the areas that we can benefit from and drill down there. And to assure you that I think all Grenadians, and certainly us, you will receive our cooperation in that regard. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable MP for the town of St. George. All right, I think we've had a lot of debates on it. Okay. Honorable MP for St. Andrew Southwest.
All right. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand in support of this bill. Mr. Speaker, in my opinion, this bill should not be a bill for debate. It should be a bill for acceptance, given its importance and its implication for us in the region and for us here in Grenada. Mr. Speaker, I listened to the member for the tongue of St. George. And of course, he's quite right. And I would like to put the areas that he made reference to, put it in a broader context by examining, Mr. Speaker, Africa and the continent Africa, and what really is the continent Africa. Mr. Speaker, I want to present some facts. The African continent is the second largest continent in the world. It has a population of 1.4 billion people, which is 16.7% of the world's total population, which means that it is a huge market for our goods and our services, and for trade, and for economic development, and for the social transformation that we're speaking about. Mr. Speaker, there are 55 countries in Africa. Nigeria is the largest in terms of population. Nigeria alone has more than 218 million people. And of course, we already have a working relation with Nigeria. There are many Nigerians living here, and of course, we have many, many friends, and there are many Grenadians living in Nigeria. A few months ago, a lady from Grenville came to see me, and she said to me, she's been living in Nigeria for over 40 years, and she's a creative. She's a creative. She's involved in design, clothing design, and so on. But there are other things that are important about Africa, the continent Africa, Mr. Speaker. The continent has 40% of the world's gold, 90% of the world's platinum. It has the largest reserves of cobalt, diamond, and uranium. Mr. Speaker, it has 65% of the world's arable land. It has 10% of the planet's internal renewable water resource. Mr. Speaker, the largest river in the world runs through Africa, the River Nile. So the potential, Mr. Speaker, for development, the potential for transformation is great. But Mr. Speaker, more than that, the African continent has given us great leaders of this world. Men and women who fought and gave their lives for a cause that is just and dignified. And they did so at a very young age. You read African history, Mr. Speaker, and you will read about Patrice Lumumba, the young, brilliant African leader of the Congo, who was murdered by Belgium at the age of 35. He fought for the independence of his country. Great leaders that we in the Caribbean must admire. We read about Julius Nyerere, the great leader from Tanzania, a young socialist who headed at a point in time the non-aligned movement as a basis for creating a new way of life for his people. We read about Samora Machel, the president of Mozambique, who at age 43 died in a plane crash in his attempt to build again a new life for his people. We read about Thomas Sankara, the young African leader from Upper Volta, now called Burkina Faso, who at age 33 was murdered as he tried to provide a better life for his people. Mr. Speaker, as we in Grenada approach our 50th anniversary celebration for independence, these leaders must come to mind, and we must take from them the strength and the philosophy that guided them as they struggle towards building a new life for the people. But Mr. Speaker, that link and that relation between Africa and the Caribbean is really has existed for some time. And what this agreement is really doing is formalizing, institutionalizing in a big way that relation. Mr. Speaker, we read about this great, outstanding Ghanese historian, Dr. Walter Rodney, who studied at the Dar es Salaam University in Tanzania and wrote his thesis entitled How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Walter Rodney became famous. He became famous. But in 1980, Mr. Speaker, as a politician, he was murdered in his hometown, Guyana, at the tender age of 40. Walter Rodney will be happy today to know that we in the Caribbean are taking this step to go back to our homeland. Mr. Speaker, as I said before, there are many Grenadians who are living in Africa. Many. I can't call a name because I didn't get permission to call a name. But I know we have many in Nigeria. We have many in South Africa itself. We have many in Kenya. We have many in Ghana. In fact, during the revolution, many Grenadians went to Ghana and to Kenya for university education, that they were trained. Right? And of course, you know, we, as Grenadians, wherever we go, we leave our mark. Right? Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity of visiting Africa in 1996 as part of an ACP, African Caribbean Pacific delegation. I went to Mali. In particular, I went to this city called Bamako. I spent a week there. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I found that as if I was living there all my life. The place wasn't strange to me. I picked up a friend called Mohammed, and me and Mohammed go on the line. We drink, we all talk. I felt as if I was home. So the history is correct. Most of the slaves who came from Africa to Grenada came from West Africa. They came from Mali. They came from Senegal. And before I left, I flew over to Senegal. And again, I felt as if I was living in this place for years. The place wasn't strange. Just because the history is true. The history is true. So the establishment of this relation with Africa, Mr. Speaker, has to be an easy job. It is something QED, quite easily done, as we say in mathematics. Quite easily done. So, Mr. Speaker, I do support this bill. As I said before, this bill is not a bill for debate. It's a bill for acceptance. And as a minister responsible for economic development, I see great opportunities for developing our tourism industry. And I want to say to you that at the level of the CTO, we are also discussing seeing Africa as a new market for our tourists. Yeah? We also see Africa as a new market for developing our culture. These days, African music, the Afrobeat, is taking over the world. Yeah? So we are moving quickly, therefore. And in fact, already discussions have started with us and Africans in areas of cooperation, in agriculture, in culture, in music, and so on, and of course, in tourism. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill has our full blessing, and I'm happy that on the other side, this bill also has full blessing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable MP, for St. Andrew South. West, is it MP for St. George? Artist? Is it your light? For St. John, from the angle, it's very difficult to tell. Honorable MP for St. John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my constituents may not like you missing the right title, you know. But, Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this bill for the agreement for the establishment of a partnership between member states of CARICOM community, Grenada, and the African Export-Import Bank. A bill which, in my opinion, Mr. Speaker, importance cannot be overstated. This bill is not just symbolic, it is transformational, and is a crucial step in our journey towards a resilient and sustainable future. Africa and the Caribbean, we bond by shared history And both the member on the other side and the member on this side alluded to that in their presentations. We are bound by shared or similar experiences, common aspirations. And here we are once again, coming together. It is not just an alliance of economies, but an affirmation of our shared struggles, our dreams and endeavors. And so today, Mr. Speaker, we intertwine our destinies, pledging to stand together in our pursuit of a just, equitable, and, again, a sustainable future. Our ambitious targets for renewable energy and Grenada's overall just energy transition are at the heart of this agreement, as outlined by the leader of government business as a key collaboration area and an opportunity for expanding trade and investment. The African Export-Import Bank, known for its steadfast commitment to green energy, has demonstrated impressive achievements in renewable energy projects across Africa. Mr. Speaker, permit me to share two examples of their investment in the solar complex in Morocco, the world's largest concentrated solar power plant, which is a testament to their unwavering commitment to sustainable energy. Similarly, their role in the Lake Turkana wind power project in Kenya has made it the largest wind power project in Africa, substantially reducing carbon emissions and providing a blueprint for future green energy projects. And so, Mr. Speaker, the benefits of this partnership, they are compelling. They provide a powerful tool to boost our economic growth, increase employment, enhance our resilience, and foster a low-carbon economy. But at the same time, they allow us to learn from our African partners' experiences and adapt best practices suited to our unique context. Mr. Speaker, while the risk of any new endeavor cannot be ignored, we can confidently say that, in this case, the potential benefits far outweighs the risks. This partnership offers us the tools we need to navigate the challenges that lie ahead. It encapsulates the strength of our commitment to sustainable development, the depth of our determination to addressing climate change, and the spirit of solidarity that binds us together. It signifies our renewed partnership with Africa and our joint vision of a sustainable future. And so the benefits of this partnership, they are multifold. And all these benefits contribute towards a stronger and more sustainable and more resilient Grenada, and indeed the entire CARICOM region. And as the MP for Tongue of St. George was speaking, I recall a similar experience I had when I visited Germany on ministerial appointment in July of last year. I met a professor and a scientist from Kenya who praised one of the former ministers, Anne David Antwine, for giving him a nutmeg plant. And he was so happy to meet someone from Grenada again to showcase where one nutmeg plant reached in Kenya because of him. So not only do we have opportunities for renewable energy, Mr. Speaker, we also have opportunities for agriculture, for tourism, and I wouldn't go into any further detail because I think both MPs did a just reasoning for that. But against this backdrop, Mr. Speaker, I believe that we should come together and support this bill. And for these reasons, I rise to place on record my support for this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP, for the constituency of St. John. And now, I think there has been much debate. So, Honorable Member, oh sorry, I'm not seeing your head. Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think the importance of the bill cannot be understated, as stated by the Learned MP for St. John, and so I couldn't let the moment pass without adding my support to the bill. And I want to start by quoting the great pt2 reggae artist of Jamaica, which says, no matter where you come from, as long as you're a black man, you're an African. And the man here includes the female. And I want to quote from a letter from the president of the Afrexim Bank to me, in which he says, and I should give some context, and this is why I said this moment is important. The bank is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. And its board of directors will be meeting in Accra, Ghana, in June. And coincidentally, the meeting dates coincide with another great anniversary that is soon coming in June of this year. But Mr. Speaker, he said this: the bank's vision is delivering the vision, powering the future. And we will use the opportunity to celebrate the considerable progress made so far towards the fulfillment of the bold vision of the founding fathers of the bank, while underscoring the bank's commitment to contributing positively to transforming African economies in the years ahead and restoring the dignity of African people wherever they may be in the world. And I want to underscore the last part of the sentence: restoring the dignity of African people wherever they may be in the world. And that restoration of dignity applies equally to us in Grenada, Mr. Speaker, and it applies equally to us in CARICOM. Because if we examine our history over the last 500 years, the only trade that has occurred between Africa and the Caribbean is the trade in men and women, the transatlantic slave trade. And so, notwithstanding 50, 60, 70 years since the creation of the 55 states of Africa, since the independence of the CARICOM states, whether they be English-speaking, Spanish-speaking, French-speaking, the reality is that no trade has taken place between the freedmen and the independent states of Africa and the Caribbean. And that is because our trading pattern in the Caribbean, our banking pattern, our travel pattern is still based on the era of slavery and still based on the era of colonialism and domination by Western Europe of Africa and the Caribbean. And so the signing of this partnership agreement is but the beginning, as rightly alluded to by the MP for the town of St. George, of the significant progress we need to make between Africa and its diaspora. Because that is what we are largely in the Caribbean. We are the diaspora of Africa. And until Africa is strong, and until Africa is respected, and until Africa is treated as an equal member amongst the races of this earth, we often don't like to talk about race, but amongst the races of this earth and the continents of this earth, its diaspora will similarly be disrespected, its diaspora will similarly be second class, its diaspora similarly will be disadvantaged. So the need to forge closer ties between the mother and its children is clear. But this is not just a one-way flow. This is not just an agreement so that the Afrexim Bank could invest in the Caribbean or have opportunities for investment. This was equally an opportunity for us to shape the direction that Africa goes in. And I'm happy that the member for St. Andrew Southwest gave the history lesson that he gave today. What he perhaps didn't make more explicitly clear is that many of the African countries became independent or were supported in their struggle for independence by persons from the Caribbean, by scholars, by freedom fighters, by academics, who went to Kenya, who went to Ghana, and who supported these nations' desire, fight, and struggle for independence and domination from the Western powers that they have. And so, Mr. Speaker, we should not forget that we equally have the opportunity to influence our mother in the right direction. And I want to raise a particular fact. The average age of an African is 19 or 20 years old. The average age of Africans ranges between 19 and 20 years. But the average age of their political leader is between 70 and 73 years. And so we need to encourage our mother to unleash the potential of the youthfulness of the African population. Because it is that generation that will transform Africa and transform, by extension, the diaspora. So when we talk about the Afrobeats, it is just the beginning. And so this partnership is about ensuring that we too, because let's face it, some of us have been so prejudiced by those in Western Europe and in North America that we hold all kinds of baseless views about Africans. So we too need to examine ourselves and ask whether or not we have not fed off the same type of prejudice, oftentimes baseless, the same type of negative images that are repeatedly portrayed about Africa, about Africans, and what we stand for. So the need for closer ties, the need to ensure that we can travel, as rightly said by the Honourable MP for the town of St. George, between Africa and the Caribbean. It is 6 hours between Ghana and Barbados, 7 hours. Less time than it would take to go to London. But our history has always driven us to London. So the day is coming, Mr. Speaker, when I am sure in the not too distant future that our travel patterns and our trade patterns will begin to change. And so we have to ensure that we use this opportunity to deepen our cultural, historical, but crucially our economic ties with Africa. I'm already aware of one investor here in Grenada who is in fact eagerly awaiting the passage of this act so that he can access financing directly from the Exim Bank. So this is not fanciful, this is real. There are genuine opportunities for economic development. There are genuine opportunities for financing from the Exim Bank to private sector investors within Grenada and by extension, the region. And so we look forward to continuing to champion, address, and work on all of the issues raised by the MP for the town of St. George. And I want to openly encourage all of us. Instead of vacationing in London, or in New York, or in Miami, try any one of the 55 states of the great continent of Africa. The continent is vast, its climate is amazing, whether it be South Africa. For those who like wine, I believe the Honourable MP for the town of St. George likes a glass of red every now and then. The wine fields of South Africa are legendary. For those who are interested in the great history, and I want to particularly make reference to North Africa, because sometimes we forget that North Africa is part of Africa. Egypt is in Africa. Morocco is in Africa. Algeria is in Africa. They may call it's not in the Middle East. It's on the continent of Africa. And so when we talk about the great civilizations, we are not talking about Europe. The pyramids aren't in Europe. They're in Africa. And so instead of spending all our time shopping in the malls in Miami, buying clothing that oftentimes are made by persons who work for little or nothing in many of the Asian countries. We can support the tourism in Africa and similarly encourage our African brothers and sisters to support our tourism. So, Mr. Speaker, I conclude by clearly indicating my support for the bill. And I should also say this is part of the government's larger strategy, Mr. Speaker, to engage in partnerships with multilateral institutions that are of our own making and of our own kind. We expect that we will also be bringing to Parliament shortly a bill for Grenada's accession to the Latin American Caribbean Development Bank, CAF, which was spoken of by my learned friend, and who's already begun to give support to Grenada's creative industry. So we are not only going to rely on the traditional Bretton Woods institutions of the World Bank and the IMF. They have their roles, but we also recognize that in the changing, dynamic world we live in, it is important for us to also look to indigenous multilateral institutions that are in fact more akin to our own conditions, our own situation, and who share a similar vision for transformation as we do. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I just wish to thank the members for their contribution to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader of Government Business. Honorable members, the question is that this bill be read a second time. All of those who have that opinion, say aye. Aye. Those of the contrary opinion, say no. The ayes have it. Indeed, the ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Agreement for the Establishment of a Partnership between Member States of the Caribbean Community and the African Export-Import Bank Bill 2023.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the House resolves itself into a committee to consider the bill clause by clause.
Honourable members, the question is that this Honourable House resolves itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. All those of that opinion, say aye. Of the contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. This Honourable House is now in committee.
Clause 2, interpretation.
Honourable members, the question is, Clause 2, interpretation, forms part of the bill. All those of that opinion, say aye. Of the contrary opinion, say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 3, agreement to have the force of law.
Honourable members, the question is, Clause 3, agreement to have the force of law, forms part of the bill. All those of that opinion, say aye. Of the contrary opinion, say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 4, supplementary agreements.
Honourable members, the question is, Clause 4, supplementary agreements, form part of the bill. All those of that opinion, say aye. Of the contrary opinion, say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 5, regulations.
Honourable members, the question is, Clause 5, regulations, forms part of the bill. All those who have that opinion, say aye. Of the contrary opinion, say no. The ayes have it.
Schedule.
Honourable members, the question is that schedule form part of the bill. All those of that opinion, say aye. Of the contrary opinion, say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title.
Honourable members, the question is, Clause 1, short title, forms part of the bill. All those who have that opinion, say aye. Of the contrary opinion, say no. Indeed, the ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the House resumes and that the Chairman reports progress on the bill.
Honourable members, the question is that the House resumes and the Chairman of the committee reports progress on the bill. As many as have that opinion, say aye. Of the contrary opinion, say no. Indeed, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable members, this Honourable House now resumes. Honourable members, I have to report that the bill was considered by a committee of the whole House and passed without amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Chairman's report be adopted.
Honourable members, the question is that the Chairman's report be adopted. As many as of that opinion, say aye. Of the contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the third reading of the bill.
Honourable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time. Honourable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time. As many as of that opinion, say aye. Of the contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
The bill for an act shortly entitled Agreement for the Establishment of a Partnership between Member States of the Caribbean Community and the African Export-Import Bank Bill 2023.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to introduce for the first reading bill for an act shortly entitled National Insurance Amendment Bill 2023.
A bill which seeks to amend the National Insurance Act, Chapter 203, the Principal Act, shortly entitled National Insurance Amendment Bill 2023.
Item 16, request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance.
Honourable MP for constituency of St. Mark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know we are all, well, I don't know, I can't say for everybody, but I am hungry, and so I'll ensure that I'll be very brief. Mr. Speaker, it was very useful, very informative to hear the contribution by various ministers, what is happening in their ministries. Some of them good for Grenada, some of them is left to be seen. However, unfortunately, there is no sitting minister in this house for health, and therefore health gets left out. Most times you have ministerial meetings. I would have liked to hear something about health, where we are, where we're going, what the plans are, especially what is happening in terms of medical supplies, because I have heard, and it is speculation, it is hearsay, several complaints about the lack of a number of medical supplies. I have a long list here, some of them very important, some of them not so important, but all important for health. And since we all agree that health is necessary for, health is the health of a country, is the wealth of a country, I want to suggest, Mr. Speaker, that one of the members on the other side be given the responsibility. From time to time, they can decide who they want to, and in collaboration with and acceptance from the Speaker, to let us know, let us on this side know, but also to let the nation know, because there are concerns. And, you know, we need a voice here, a voice that can give answers to the people. So I want to urge through you, Mr. Speaker, that there be some kind of arrangement on the other side. I was told that there was going to be a press conference today, and then subsequently I was told that there's not going to be, but I want to beg the Prime Minister, member for St. David, and whoever is responsible, that perhaps in the consideration for the next press conference, they can include something on health to let us know exactly what the status is, because we don't want to unnecessarily create worry and panic when perhaps the government is well taking care of things. I just want to finally throw out the question, and just to find out, not to get answers now, the OECS PPS was a great supplier of a number of the medications that we have used over the years, and some of the medication on my list, I still see it in the OECS PPS formulary. So I don't know if we're still using the OECS PPS. They used to give credit before. I don't know if the policy has changed, but I want to urge that if there is any truth at all in this matter regarding medical supplies, that we give it some level of priority, put it on the list for implementation. My dear brother on the other side is very good with implementation. Let's see us implement something for health, because we can't move forward, no matter what eloquent and beautiful things and transformative plans we have. We have to ensure that we maintain health, and that we even transform it to a higher level, but at least to keep our health system on the top burner somewhere. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable MP, for the constituency of St. Mark. I think you've raised some very interesting observation. That matter of health, it concerns everyone. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the matter of shortage of medication at our health facilities has been something that has been plaguing us for some time. Not just now. It seemed to be a recurring decimal. I did speak to the Minister for Health in relation to this particular subject matter, and he informed me, Mr. Speaker, that the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Finance are struggling to come to terms with bills far back as 2021 and 2022. This, Mr. Speaker, is a huge problem, because medical drugs, as the MP for St. Mark would know as a practitioner herself, is very expensive. very expensive to produce, and it is a costly commodity for the state. But when you're owing millions of dollars to the suppliers of drugs for your country, when you send payment to them and have to apply to invoices that is running close to 2 years old, you can understand when you try to procure new drugs and you place an order, you do not get what you expect. And so we are coping with this right now. The millions of dollars that is due for drugs as far back as 2021. This is a problem. I am informed that the list of drugs that is missing is not that long list that I think I'm seeing from where I sit, but I was informed that it is about 6 drugs. And some of them, the ministry attempted to purchase from local drugstores here in Grenada. So you see the predicament, Mr. Speaker. And if we are purchasing from the local drugstores, it simply means that they will quickly run out of drugs themselves, and that the supply that they would get will be inadequate to deal with our needs. It is a problem, Mr. Speaker, that we've inherited. I know health has always been a matter of concern for all governments. We, Mr. Speaker, as a caring government, is doing the best that we can in the circumstances, trying to cope with these long outstanding bills. But, Mr. Speaker, it's not just a matter of payment. It's not just a matter of payment. It's a matter of analyzing all of these bills that is close to 2 years old and determining whether or not they are worthy of payment and settlement. So there is some confusion, Mr. Speaker, that has to be settled regarding this bill. So we expect in due course, as we continue, to unravel the situation, that we'll get to a stage where we come close as possible to current. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Leader of Government Business, for the update. And I do hope as Parliament we will use the powers of Parliament to make sure the nation's health is in good order. Thank you very much, Leader of Government Business. Honorable MP for Carriacou, Anthony Martin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Pleasant good afternoon to all. Mr. Speaker, I thought it was important for me to use the opportunity to speak to my constituents, to the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique, as we wrap up, and to just update them on a few things. As members are aware, a couple weeks ago we had an accident at our power plant in Carriacou. And since then, the island has been plagued with load shedding and the constant blackouts. And I know that constituents have concerns because their appliances are spoiling, including me. I had a fridge and my water pump spoiled as a result of some of the load shedding. But I just need to let the constituents know that by the end of this week, Grenlec has ordered or rent and a generator from Trinidad that will take care of the load shedding issue that we are facing with. And by the end of this week, it should arrive in Grenada. and by the end of next week, it should arrive in Carriacou and installed, and the problem that we are now facing will be something of the past. And of course, working along with Ministry of Climate Resilient and with that EDF project that is being implemented in Carriacou, that too will assist us. I think it's also important for the constituents to know, Mr. Speaker, that very soon we will be, it's the possibility of having our own lab in Carriacou is something that we're working on. We're working closely with the Ministry of Health and a private partner so that we no longer have to send our blood to Grenada, and sometimes in route of Grenada it spoils, and the patients have to redo the testing over and over. So that is something that we are working on. I also want to raise a vexing issue, an issue, Mr. Speaker, that the constituents have and have been bringing to my attention over and over. And I want them to rest assured that as the parliamentary rep, we are working to ensure that those matters are dealt with. I am very concerned, Mr. Speaker, that the constituents of Carriacou and pt2 feel as though they have been harassed at the port whenever they come from Carriacou, traveling with the Dolly or the Tiril Express. The constant searches, the constant questioning for their license, driver's license and insurance, and how long do they have to stay, how long will they be staying in Grenada? Forgetting, Mr. Speaker, that Carriacou and pt2 is part of the state of Grenada, and such harassment, Mr. Speaker, isn't called for. So we are working along with the line ministries and working along with Ports Authority and the security port so that we could come up with a mechanism so that the people of Carriacou and pt2, we don't feel as though we are unwanted stepchildren and feel as though we're not part of the state. While I understand that searches and random searches are legal and could be done at any time, and while I understand that Ports Authority have rules and regulations, regionally and international regulations and rules and standards that they have to follow, at the same time, we must remember that we are one. And someone that is leaving St. Andrews and coming to St. George's and is not harassed to ask how long would they be staying in St. George's for. Likewise, the people of Carriacou and pt2, when traversing with the Tiril Express or the Dolly, should not be harassed when they meet at the port to find out how long do they intend to stay, and for asking this long line of questions. Mr. Speaker, I'm very concerned about that. And as parliamentary representative, the people of there gave me the voice in Parliament so that I can represent them, and I think I have an obligation to raise the concerns that they have. Mr. Speaker, on the matter of we worked along with the Ministry of National Security and the police, and I'm happy to say, Mr. Speaker, that in short order, the drivers in Carriacou will no longer have to send to Grenada for their laminated license, and that in short order, we will be able to print our laminated driver's license in Carriacou. And it's a bold step, Mr. Speaker. It's something that I've campaigned on, and to see it coming to fruition means a lot to me, and of course to the drivers of Carriacou and pt2. And before I end, I think it's very important for me to state in the House, because the constituents are asking, when would local government be coming for the people of Carriacou and pt2? It's within the Constitution. We have been clamoring for years for local government for Carriacou and pt2. I know that the team at the Ministry of Legal Affairs, the legal drafters and the team there are working assiduously so that we can, by the end of the first quarter, or by the beginning of the third, we can see some movements on local government. It is very important. The people of Carriacou and pt2 have been clamoring for it, and I will ensure that I do everything in my power as Minister for Local Government and as a parliamentary representative for the people of Carriacou and PT Martinique, that we do everything that we can to bring this to them. And finally, Mr. Speaker, let me use the opportunity to welcome the Honorable Delma Thomas on this side of the House, where it is safer, where she don't have to be concerned about people calling her mentally ill, or people harassing her, or people ill-treating her. This part, this side of the House, is a side of the House that we give love, or we show love, we're people-centered. We're all about the development of Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique. And together with Sister Delo, together with the Honorable Delma Thomas, and for those that will soon develop the testicular fortitude to come and decide, we will move this country forward together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable MP, for the constituency of Carriacou and PT Martinique. Leader of Government Business.
So, Speaker, I beg to move that the House be adjourned, signed and aye.
Honorable members,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was going to give the member the opportunity. I thought he was speaking on the adjournment. I want to raise, Mr. Speaker, if you allow me, just one issue as it relates to constituency offices. So I made a note, Mr. Speaker, services provided through constituency office, and I was very happy to hear you say that you visited and you found all to be well as you visited around the island. I want to raise a concern, Mr. Speaker, as it relates particularly to opposition MP offices. I heard reference earlier today on 2 occasions as it relates to the services offered there. And I'm not speaking here about the administrative services. I know the House Committee has been and continues to work on the issues that are administrative in nature. But I'm speaking here about services to the people of the constituency. Mr. Speaker, when we were elected, we do have a responsibility to serve our people, to represent our people. I said it before, I'm going to repeat it again. I am not in any way, shape, or form recommending the how our constituents are serviced, right? So I am not at all recommending any form that this can be done. But what is clear, Mr. Speaker, is that whatever the form, those persons who are elected should be aware of it. And there should be at least a way, and I'm appealing to the Parliament this morning as well, a way that we can be informed. So if we break it down to basic information to start with. So we are not at all saying that service A or B has to be delivered at the office, but we are saying at least let us start with information. I've also noticed, Mr. Speaker, and maybe I should specify a little bit on information. So maybe what the House can facilitate and support is if they can collaborate with the government to provide some form of listing so that we can have updated information as to where and how services can be accessed by the people that we represent. And I'm thinking this is probably the first basic place we can start. So what is the name of the coordinator for Program A? Remember, we are representing people. What is the name of the person who's leading on Program B? Where can Service C be accessed? Can we at least have a form that we can say to persons, this is the form that you fill for Program D? But, Mr. Speaker, the other aspect of this I would like to see addressed soonest. And I'm using my constituency as an example. You may have a constituent who goes to constituency B requesting a service, a particular service. Let us just for argument's sake, housing, right? Or that person wants to apply for the seed program. it sometimes baffles me why a person would be told at constituency B's office, where that constituency has an elected member of parliament in the government, to come to my office, that I'm the parliamentary representative, or we are responsible for A or B or C. Mr. Speaker, I've had cases where we literally call to confirm, well, why is this person sent here? Why were they not sent where the service is actually provided? Mr. Speaker, all I'm saying this morning, and I think sufficient time has passed, that we can streamline, we can clarify, we can ensure that the system is in place so that all persons can fairly access whatever services are available. And therefore I appeal maybe some collaboration, government and parliament, to ensure that all MPs, whichever side of the house they sit, have the information and at least would be able to direct constituents accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable MP for St. Andrew South East. Your issues have been noted. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to move that this Honorable House be adjourned sine die.
Honorable members, the question is that this Honorable House be adjourned sine die. All those of that opinion, say aye. Those of the contrary opinion, say no. Indeed, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. This Honorable House now stands adjourned. Sine die.
On Saturday, July 29, Montrouge Plainfield will be transformed into a sea of grills as food, fun, and friends collide.